Hey everyone, welcome to the last session before the beer break. My name is Bill McGee. I've been running around. It's been great having you all here, and I'm happy to be moderating the lightning talks. Everybody knows the rules. It's 5 minutes. There's a counter up here. We'll have the presenters come up one after another. One note from Jared, if you have a specific request for a connector or dongle, feel free to, for the presenters of course, feel free to step back and ask them about it. Our first presenter then today is going to be Richard Bradshaw, who's doing Sacred, a mnemonic for a solid automated test check design. You don't know Richard, he is the boss of the Ministry of Test. And where is Richard? That's Lauren. Richard, come on up.
Did you have the little adapter?
Yeah, it should be an adapter.
It's in his hand. Yay. Okay. Is it working? Whoa! Well, that's far too trippy. Let's try this one. See, Apple making different connections for everything. Yay. There we go. All right, time to go. Hey, everyone. My name is Richard Bradshaw, also known as the Friendly Tester. Been doing Selenium automation testing for about 12 years. Started to see a bit of a pattern that people didn't really know how to design tests. So I spent a lot of my time in my research, and I've created a little tiny mnemonic to talk you through how to go about creating tests. So the first one, well, the mnemonic is Sacred, as you can see. It was originally Scared, and then I did a talk about it, and people went, "It doesn't really work, Richard." So I changed it to Sacred in the idea that our automated checks are really valuable and we want to look after them. So the S stands for state. So we need to, this is the bit that's the most important thing that I never see conference talks about. If you can't control the state of your application, you cannot automate it. That's where a large majority of your flakiness will come from. It doesn't come from your logic that you have when you're waiting for elements. A lot of it comes from being not able to put your application in the state that you want it to be. So state covers things like data management. Can you create data with ease? Or are you one of these companies that's importing a massive database at the start of every run? Or are you being able to have an API to add data? The other thing is things like config flags. Can you set them automatically as part of your code? Can you toggle feature flags on and off as part of your code and actually have all that stuff deployed? So that's what the state stands for. And then we have algorithm. So the algorithm bit is the bit where you're going through your application. So if it was a WebDriver test, the bit from when the page loads to when you come to do your assertion, that bit's the algorithm. So there was a great talk by Karina just now about how she models and thinks about her application and puts all the weights in place. That's the skill that we need to improve on. We think we know what we do as humans. We think we just click on the field, type a box in, click next, and we tell WebDriver to do exactly the same. But actually, you were smart enough to wait. You were looking for things on the screen. You knew when to interact. How many of you have ever logged into an application and you move your mouse to this random point on the screen where there's nothing there because you know the button's going to appear there in about 5 seconds. And then you click it. As soon as it appears, you click it. WebDriver can't do that unless you tell it to. Or it could be the calling of an API. Any of these things, but basically the start of your test to the point where you're going to do your assertion. And then we have codified oracles. Is anyone familiar with the word oracle? It's essentially how we define if there's a problem here. So your assertions are actually oracles. So to do good assertions, you first need to understand oracle. You need to understand what it is you're trying to test. So once we realize what our assertion is and our oracles are, we can codify them. The problem with codifying them is they become fixed. They're codified. They're explicit now. They can't change. They can't relearn. Whereas a human, we change on the fly. I could tell you a piece of information now and you'll continue to use that. Automation can't do that. So we need to get them right. We need to design good ones, and we need to implement them into our code. The R stands for reporting. It takes two forms. We need reporting to actually tell us the information about our checks, pass, fail, how long it took to run. We need that kind of reporting. Where are you putting this information? Are you putting it on a dashboard? Are you injecting it into Jira? Where are you putting this information? We have to think about it so we can design it into our architectures and into our automated checks. The second one for reporting is what happens when it fails? What information are you collecting? Are you automatically downloading logs? Are you taking screenshots? Are you taking copies of the DOM and all the HTML? What are you doing when it fails? You have to think about that and design it. It will make your debugging a lot easier. And then we have an E. E for execution. Where are you going to execute these tests? Are you designing them to be executed everywhere? Can they be run on production? Or are you designing them to run solely on the QA environment or on the test environment? And if you are doing that, who else has access to that environment? Can they log on and literally destroy your tests? I had someone who changed the admin password. All my scripts failed because they were all using the same user. So think about where you're running them and design them accordingly. Because if you don't own that environment, external factors could influence your tests, and you need to know about them. And the final one is the overarching goal. They need to be deterministic. That is the whole point of automated checks. If they're not deterministic, they're going to cause you pain, and you might end up with one of these poor people who come into work every day with a broken build. You spend 3 hours fixing it, you go for your lunch, you come back, it's broken again. You carry on fixing it, and that is your life now. That is what you do. That's boring. We want to keep learning, we want to keep doing cool things. So this is how I design my automated checks.
Boom. 5 minutes. Amazing.
Thank you, everyone.
Runs like a Swiss watch. Okay, next up is autonomous testing and dynamic locators. Oren Rubin, CEO of Testem.
Right there. Woohoo. Hi, everyone. I want to talk about, I did a few things. But I want to talk about, when we talked about this sacred, I want to talk about one thing in specific right now, and that's the part of the clicking part. The one we said is we kind of struggle with it right now. Everyone's struggling with how do I write my automation, I click on stuff. And you said there's a few more challenges on the way. I think the clicking on stuff would probably get easier in the next few years. I think that we found what the problem is. The problem is, of course, it's not just it's not that it's hard to do it, it's that we were looking at it wrong. I think that when you click on an element, we were looking at one way, one XPath or one CSS selector to find an element and just one attribute. And I think the premise that this is good enough, that's not enough. I think in the future, test automation, the flow parts will be written by your real customers actually going to the application and using that. So you'll know exactly what to test and what the flows are and what to click. But right now, I think we're in a step before that. Then you can really use not just one locator, but a lot more. So in order for me to show you what I want to do is actually, usually I play this game and I say, oh, which attribute should I use? Should I use a class, an idea? And the result is almost the same, is that all of them, they don't work. Given that you want to click this simple button right here, everyone keeps saying, oh, if you have an ID, use that. But very fast you learn that it doesn't work. And then you can look at a lot of different ways and saying, oh, why didn't it work? well, if I ran it again, it didn't work. Maybe there's a random generated ID there. There could be a lot of different errors for having the ID change. If something doesn't work but it has the same ID, maybe it's the iframe. Someone changed as you know, someone changed the project, and now the iframe has a different URL, so you need to find the correct frame for that first. There's so many things. There's a lot of different things that can fail your test even if you chose just the idea. There's a few more. It could be, besides iframe, there's the false feeling of asynchronous, that you say, oh, wait a second, I was looking for that, but I have to retry again and again because it just wasn't loaded. So there's a bunch of those. I've seen things that people take a component, put another one, and now you have two ideas. The browser doesn't enforce that. I've seen things like two bodies. I've seen everything in the last 10 years. So then everyone says, okay, if it's a reusable component, let's use class. So people started using classes a lot. But then, of course, when you change the way it looks, you change the appearance and usually change the class. So apparently the class actually changes a lot and it breaks as well. And the second thing is classes are for repeatable component. Which item should I choose? How do I choose? Because of that, if I want to click on an image, you want to have sometimes something more complicated. I want to click on the image, but next to Los Angeles, next to something, which is go to the parent, and then go to another child, and then find the exact class. Otherwise, you get things like this, which is horrifying. So eventually, when you go and you try a lot of stuff, you always end up with things which are fragile. So that's my point. None of those can actually work. You have to use all of them. And in order for me to show, I want to show one small thing, which is, get that? Preset something just for you to show something. And I'm going to run something. And what the app does right now, or the test does, is kind of like it logs in, and then I added a pause just before clicking the yellow button. So the one thing that I want to do is I want to change, before it clicks it, I want to change all the attributes that I can think of. So I'm going to change it right here super fast. So I'm going to change the text for the button. Okay. It's really hard to see. So instead of select destination, we'll choose who was before me. That was the friendly tester. So I'll say Richard. So I can change a lot of the properties right here. And I can change a few more. And I can even move the button somewhere else. And the point that I want to show is, it doesn't really matter which properties I change. Okay, I've changed it enough. Let's run it. Is that you do want to click it. A human would know how to click it anyway. And that's why I think that we should evolve and start using, instead of one locator, we should use a bunch of locators. So we'd know that, oh yeah, the text has changed, the class has changed, there's the location changed, but we still knew as humans, you knew exactly how to click that button. And I think computers would know right now, in the future, would know how to click it as well. So the point is don't try to just use one locator. I think the future is going to the fact that you're going to record parts of your test, and that's because you're going to have a lot more information in there. So that's basically what we do. We help authoring tests, just providing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Reset timer, please. Okay, thank you very much, Orm. Next up is Jonathan Lips, J. Lips. He will be showing a record and playback in Appium Desktop. What? Is that exactly?
Yeah, I know. Okay, so here's Appium, maybe-ish. Okay, here's Appium running. If you've never downloaded Appium Desktop, it's here at GitHub, Appium/Appium-desktop. We got a development version running, so I'm just going to run against this Appium server that I have locally. I've put together some desired capabilities here. platform name iOS. I'm going to run a little simple test app that I've created. So when I start a session, it's launching up an inspector that will enable me to look at the hierarchy of my app and the locators and everything. So let's move straight to recording. So click this button to start recording, and now I can take actions in the application. So I want to go to this login screen. I want to enter a username, Alice, and password. By the way, the simulator it's running on is over here, so you can see it's actually doing these things. My password. And you can see it's actually generating Python equivalents to the WebDriver code that I'm generating through Appium here. I could change the language and we could look at Ruby instead. And then to finish off our test, let's log out. Oops. So now that this is all done, it did happen. I just need to refresh, I guess. Great. I can save this test to my test library. I'll log in as Alice Lois. And we crash or something like that, but hopefully it's still here. So yeah, this is in development. So now I've got a test library. I can run against any of these servers, sauce or whatever. But here we go, log in as Alice, and let's try and play this. So let's load up our simulator. It's running against Appium. These are all the steps that I recorded, and it is doing them and giving me feedback as I go. And because we didn't encounter any errors in the test, consider that it passed. I can see the test run that just happened over here. If I want, I can look at these steps again and can keep doing it. So that's playback in Appium Desktop. So yeah, this is in development. It's not released yet, but I'm not exactly sure about the UI that I think will be best, but certainly within a month or two, this stuff will all be available for you to use. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was remarkably efficient. All right, next up is Siam from Carousel, who is going to talk about how he helped 10,000 testers with 100 lines of code.
Hello? Yeah. Thanks. So I'm going to talk about how did I help 10,000 testers using 100 lines of code. So myself, Shyam, I work at Carousel. It's a Singapore-based company, and I'm a tester there. Before joining Carousel, I have been working with companies like Oracle, Cognizant, and UST Global. This pic is from the spin bar. Okay, so QA Symphony invited a few of us to play local ping pong tournament. So I just got a title, so I would like to play ping pong also. This pic is from the last Berlin conference. I tried to speak at the Lightning conference, but it was not based on the vote. It is like the first come, first serve, so I couldn't make it because I made my entry as the 11th one, and only the first 10 subjects were went for the Lightning talk. Okay, so thank you everyone for voting for me. So it's just because of you I made this. So CSS versus XPath. I know you all guys prefer the CSS over XPath, but there are some situations where you need to use the XPath. Couple of years back, I have been working with a project where it was a business process BPM tool. Then the ID was not an option because the dev team was building the website just using a drag and drop components. And I cannot rely on the identifiers or CSSs. And there was a lot of HTML table I need to deal with. Then I needed to use the XPath. So we started using XPath, and a lot of new QA people will joining our team because we were ramping up. So every day I needed to teach my junior QAs how to write XPath effectively. Then I thought of just automating it. Then I wrote a Chrome extension which can give you relative XPath. Sorry. Yep. So we can see a demo. So I'm opening carousel.com, and I'm going to find out the name of a product that listed by a user. So how can I do it? Something like, it's very simple. You just need to right-click on the components which you want to inspect. So here, what we're going to do, we're going to find out the name of the product which is listed by Jintank 913. So as the first step, you just open it. So this is how the UI look like. And you can select the element by just right-click on it. So as a first step, I'm going to click on the Nike. Then I'm going to click on Jintank. So you can see that the XPath expression being captured. And once I click the second, the relationship between these two elements, that expression being generated. So you can just delete it what you really don't want, and you can violate your XPath. So if you want to write a custom XPath, and if you want to try out whether it's valid or not, what you can do, you can just, for example, I want to see how many hyperlinks are on this page. So what I can do, I just type //a and click enter. So all the hyperlinks will be displayed on this. So I did this on 2015. And these are some of the reviews I got. So it feels good when people are talking good things about you. And I just love the fact that I can spread some happiness to the world. Then it has been used by 141 nations and more than 10,000 users now. So these are some of the top countries which is using the relative XPath expression. Yep. This is some of the useful links. So you can have a look at how the code look like. I already open sourced it. Thank you.
You were going to get a 15-second extension for mic issues. And I'm sorry, it's my phone that is buzzing the podium. Whoops. Okay, this next one is part of the organizing team. I'm fascinated here. No, it's you. Okay. We just had to laugh. 5 terrible things about this hotel that testers would have found. This is Paul, and take it away, sir.
I'm a sponsor, not an organizer. Sauce Labs is not liable for the content of this presentation. So let's see if this will work. Play. Awesome. So 5 terrible things about this hotel that testers would have found, or why I'm no longer welcome in hotels. So my name is Paul Reinheimer. I'm a co-founder at WonderProxy. We have servers all around the world. They help you with your GeoIP application testing. They're pretty sweet. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about funny things. I still have 5 minutes left, which is awesome. So first, okay, reception. You've all checked into this hotel, or many of you have checked into this hotel, and maybe you tried to find your way here. And so after you come in, after dropping your car off, you see this very large sign. It says registration, you need to go upstairs. Registration and hotel lobby aren't quite the same thing for me, but okay, I'll go upstairs. And then I get to the top of the stairs, and I find another set of escalators, so I go up them. And that's not where you need to go. You needed to have gone up the first set of escalators and then make a complete 180-degree turn and go the other way. QA people often end up wearing like a secret second hat as user advocates. When they see something, they say, well, this is stupid. This is not the way it works, but that's not what we need to be doing for these users. And I'm sure that in this sort of situation, that would happen. And to say, this is dumb, we need to do something better. And so the programmer said something along the lines of, it's okay, I'll make a sign. But they're programmers, so they actually made a very, very small sign. And that's how you're supposed to figure out how to get to the lobby. Number 2, reception. There's more. At some point along the way, they decided to implement a new feature, which was they decided to add this Alcatraz Life on Thee. Grammar is not your job as a QA person. But in doing that, they had a regression because they covered up the navigation. If you had manual testers or any sort of visual testing, you would have caught this problem. But that is the sign behind that thing. Number 3, elevators. I had a lot I could choose when it came to talking about the elevators in this hotel. But specifically, my first night after checking in, I had a problem with my room. And so I needed to go to the lobby. Let's see here. Oh, no. And absolutely nothing happened. And I did not know where the lobby was. This building has many, many floors. I didn't know where it was going, but I couldn't get there. This is why you want to automate your tests so they keep running and you can keep making sure that things are running all the time. Number 4, room service. I like carrot cake. I often get to a hotel and decide I'm willing to spend $12 for a slice of carrot cake. That's about how much a piece of carrot cake costs in a hotel after like delivery and service charges and union fees. And usually what I do is I go and I pick up like the ugly brown binder and it says, carrot cake is $7 and there's a gratuity included. But here there's no binder, there's an iPad or a stupid iPad. And so I look at this and I'm like, I have no idea how to get carrot cake. So I click on the help icon in the top right-hand corner. Maybe that helps someone. That did not help me. And so I just give up and I phone the front desk. And I'm like, I would like some carrot cake through room service. And they're like, sir, we don't do room service. And I was very confused. So they're like, but you can go down to the hotel, like the restaurant, and then you can order at the bar, and then you can bring the food up yourself. And I'm like, you've missed an opportunity to charge $7 for somebody to carry this cake to me. So I go back to the iPad to find the menu, because maybe they want to have carrot cake, I can figure out what I order. And eventually I get to this screen, and apparently the iPad doesn't know what hotel I'm in, which seems kind of weird. I feel like the QA team would have said, we know what hotel we're in, it's an iPad, we can figure this out. Eventually I figure out, I'm going to do the pick up the food and come back. And so I find the grab and go menu, which is actually the breakfast menu. So this was just a horrible experience, and QA people would have ripped this to shreds. They would have said, the old binder had all of this information, people knew how to use it, we didn't need a help screen. Why did we get rid of the binder, and why did we forget which hotel we were in? Finally, doors. Here's the doors at the front of the hotel. Do you push these or do you pull these? You're going to get it wrong half the time. Tiny bit of bonus material. Here's a sign beside the elevator. Many tourists are going to want to go to Market Street. That's a popular place. It's a big thing. That's where you go to get on the cable car and ride up the hill. Market Street's on the 3rd floor. It's not. They've just named a room named Market Street, which was dumb. If you push the power button, the help says you want to turn the iPad off, push this button, you don't actually it doesn't actually turn off. Instead, you get a preferences screen. So that was all a lie. And also, why is it so cold? Very last thing, if you're thinking about design, you're thinking about your users, this is the best book I've ever read. If you join Wonder Proxy, I buy 3 books for you. And it talks about how when you're designing things, you need to think about your users. So they're good for programmers, good for QA people. It's an awesome book. Thank you very much. And if I could make one last pitch, there's a trivia game going on, and there's like 11 people who've entered, and there's 11 different prizes. So if you want to win something, the odds are really good.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. Okay. We are running a tight ship here. We can reset to 5 minutes. And next up is Mike LeBaron, who will be talking about an anatomy of an exploit, mapping a layered threat approach to security.
All right, let's see. Things wrong with this hotel, indeed. Jeez. There we go. What was that? Oh, yeah. Not getting gather windows, yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah, awesome. Sweet, thank you very much. All right, have about, what, 3 minutes left, 4 minutes? How are you guys doing? I'm Mike LeBaron. I'm a staff security engineer at Sauce Labs. And now that we've got, got a good few minutes, you know, got a nice cast. You know, this is a lot of preaching to the choir, but I think it's important to say, you know, you imagine, and the fortress analogy is good, but there are these things, unfortunately. So the question comes up a lot, are we secure, right? And it's a question that may be good, but may also lead to not many places. Thomas Hobbes spoke about spiritus terms, and what he meant by that was terms that eventually lose their meaning when they're repeated too many times, right? So he mentioned the word, for example, freedom, right? We talk about what is freedom, are we free, this and that. We eventually don't know what that means anymore. We have an idea of what that means, and the same with security. A better approach is to think about threat mitigation. And when you think about threat mitigation, that can lead you towards more attainable goals and towards more actionable items, which is always what you want in security. You want to have as many actionable items as possible. So we can use exploit anatomy. We can look at exploits, what they mean, how scary they might seem, but as well as breaking down the dependencies that they have. So for example, this week, we had 2 vulnerabilities come out, one related to SAML. These are industry-wide vulnerabilities. SAML's XML commenting vulnerability, and Ruby on Rails released some new versions to patch an input validation issue, allowing people to run XSS attacks. So when we break down each of these, we run an anatomy on each of these. The problem that we're facing is, how do we patch everything? How do we keep up with everything? How do we make sure that all our libraries, all our versions are updated? That's important to do, but there's other things behind that. When we break down an exploit, when you think about how could this exploit actually be achieved, you see that there are different steps, there are different dependencies, some of them tech, some of them human. And when you address those, then you can come up with actionable items so that even if you're worried about, do we have these different versions, how can we get these deployed, how can we get these pull requests to ensure that we're fully patched, that we're fully addressing all of these scary things coming out in the media, these new disclosures, well, at least we can say that these other dependencies we're addressing, and we're making these exploits that much harder. The analogy, again, comes back to a house, to a fortress, to something like that. If you're locking your doors, if you're closing your windows, it's an analogy that's used over and over again, but you have to think of these in terms of exploits. What is the Ruby on Rails input validation vulnerability? Well, how will that actually be used? Someone will be poking around. They'll see, oh, here's an outdated version of Ruby on Rails. I can try to launch an XSS attack that's going to bypass this whitelist sanitizer. The SAML issue, I'm in an organization, and I see that there's this version, I see that this library is being used. It's a vulnerable library. I can impersonate another user. So now we're thinking about the exploit. One issue that has to be addressed is the insider threat issue, and that can't be ignored. These require people to exploit them. You need human beings to actually exploit these vulnerabilities. Some of them are coming from the outside, and they're poking at your organization, they're testing it, they're seeing what's available, and some of them are inside your organization, especially as your organization gets larger, and some of them actually depend on people within your organization. The SAML one is a good issue when you have, in a lot of cases, 2 users are required to be part of the same organization. And we can do some threat mitigation through testing as well. As we're testing, we're thinking about functionalities. Is this application doing what it's supposed to do, what it's intended to do? But what happens when it does something that it wasn't intended to do? Or it does something that it was intended to do in the wrong way? You can also run these things against certain vulnerability scanner integrations. For example, Selenium runs with a ZAP integration, and you can get some data that way. So building things into your CI pipeline, addressing the human issue, thinking about the threat actors, this is a multi-layered approach to security. So when these scary things come out as disclosures in the media and you're worried about your patching, you can think about what are the dependencies required to conduct this exploit, and how can I address those so that even if maybe I'm not so strong on the others, I have addressed those things. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Mike, and that is a wrap. That was great, right on time. So we're now off to the craft beer break, and then at 4 o'clock, it'll be the closing keynote with Lebosh Parabek, talking about the Sauce Labs roadmap. I'll see you out there with a glass in my hand.